The message is that the United States not only wants to have better relations with everyone in the region, President Trump just underlined that on his trip, but in particular with Iraq and very much in particular with the Kurdistan regional government and the people of Kurdistan. So that cannot be separated from our larger policies. But the point is, it's all of a piece. This is all very good. We're building on momentum, pushing back Iran, emphasizing business opportunities in resolving disputes and disagreements in the region, including those that affect the Kurdistan regional government. Well, first of all, the United States has had a very special relationship with the people of Kurdistan. I was involved in that when I was in Ankara, and we were supporting in the 1990s um, Operation Northern Watch to ensure that the people of Kurdistan would not be attacked by the criminal Saddam regime. Then in 2003, we overthrew that regime with the help of the Peshmerga in Kurdistan. And of course, we worked in the 2005 constitution to ensure that Kurdistan would have, that first of all, the constitution would allow regional entities, and that the Kurdistan regional entity would have its proper place within the larger Iraq. So it's a long-term relationship. We, of course, have troops based there. We very much respect the role of the Kurdish Peshmerga in the fight against the Islamic State, and we look forward to continuing and deepening that relationship. Well, the United States has a general rule following the Charter of the United Nations not to interfere directly in internal affairs. Granted, we have violated that at times, but you just heard President Trump in the Gulf stating that those days are over. So we well understand the complicated relationship between the major parties in Kurdistan. We follow it closely, but we do not have a, as we say, dog in that fight. We do not have a favorite. What we hope and urge is that to better defend against threats like the Islamic State, to be able to negotiate strongly and positively with Baghdad and with neighbors such as Turkey, who are very important, it is really essential to have a good government. Well, first of all, that's the first way. Secondly, Trump is working on a much better relationship with Turkey, which has very significant economic interests in northern Iraq and particularly Kurdistan. So we can work on that. But I would just say Trump is not replacing diplomacy with economics. He sees the two as of a piece. And importantly, he believes that his efforts to preserve peace through diplomacy will only be supported by the American voter, particularly those people who voted for him, if they see economic benefits coming from his diplomacy. So he sees the two together. Thus, you can't separate them. We're talking a bit about ideology here. I was taught in the Clausewitzian German school that diplomacy is using all elements of power, including the military, or that is, which as Clausewitz said, is the continuation of politics, diplomacy, through other means, the other means being military means. So it's not an either or. But what Trump is saying by preferring power over diplomacy is the kind of weak diplomacy he sees presidents in past years doing. Soft power, thinking that America and our values, America and our culture, America and our assistance programs alone will make it a safer world and more beneficial economically to Americans. Neither have turned out to be true. Look at China, look at Russia, look at the trade imbalance in the United States. So he's looking for a different kind of diplomacy, which is conflated or confused with the idea of power or military force. We're going to have to take a really big step back here because we're, I think, getting something wrong. And I've done how many of these interviews across the Middle East and in the United States over the past 30 plus years? Hundreds. And we always start with the Middle East is in crisis. It is torn apart by war. What's the way out of this? Folks, we're already out of this. The Islamic State has been all but destroyed, and we're working hard to ensure it stays destroyed in the Badia Desert in Syria and in its little outposts in Iraq. In Iran, the other major threat to the region, has been pushed back. Fighting has ended almost everywhere in the Middle East, including our campaign against the Houthis. The one place where it is continuing is in Gaza, but that is not a major conflict for the region as a whole. And the United States is working hard to find an early ceasefire and a final settlement for Gaza as well. So I see the region as on the cusp of ready to embrace a new, different order that focuses on peace, rather like South America, as opposed to the Middle East we've known for the last 60 years. Well, first of all, we have tried very hard to protect the interests of Iraq as a whole with special diplomacy to ensure that the position of Kurdistan in the larger Iraq that was laid out in the Constitution is maintained. Thus, we've had very active diplomacy on, for example, oil and gas issues, not just because of the American firms, but because of the constitutional issues that are involved. We've also been very supportive of Iraqi Kurdistan's relations with Turkey. And we have been very opposed to the role of the PKK in northern Iraq. We're delighted that the PKK has accepted a final ceasefire and disbandment. And we've been very, very opposed to. Yeah, you've interrupted me, and we've been very interested in the Iranian role in Kurdistan and the rest of Iraq and pushing on that. That's it. I have been a critic of the last administration's failure to work harder on this issue because it is an important issue for Iraq as a whole. It's an important issue for Kurdistan, for the relationship between Erbil and Baghdad, and an important relationship between Turkey, Erbil, and Baghdad. And as we said, for the international oil companies and the reputation of both Kurdistan and Iraq as a whole. There are obviously a number of different issues involving constitutional provisions, and I've learned them by heart. The difference between new oil and old oil, questions of who has the authority to export across the borders of Iraq, and the set of legal issues in European courts, particularly between the Ankara and Baghdad. Some of those have been settled. I know that there are agreements that have been negotiated between Erbil and Baghdad. So we've seen some steps forward. We've seen some positive steps by the courts. But you're absolutely right. There is no between the Kurdistan region and where? Well, first of all, we look at Iraq as a whole. We have to because it's an independent sovereign country. And of course, we have energy and other interests, very big interests in recent months in all of Iraq, and other firms that have an American personality, such as BP, are very, very active in very important projects in the South. So we don't see a contradiction. We don't just try to decide which is more important, who we should go for, who we did. Even when I was ambassador, I made it clear to energy companies that while there were certain risks, given the open legal questions, that investing in the energy sector in both northern Iraq and Kurdistan and in the south around Basra made sense. And I think I was correct in making that assessment. Oh, no, no, we said, no, we said both north of Baghdad, including the Kurdistan region, and south of Baghdad in the Basra region. We made it clear that anywhere in Iraq it made sense that they were different. Now, inside the Kurdistan region, there are different constitutional provisions. As I mentioned, they deal with new oil and old oil, and we all know about that. So there are some differences that firms had to be aware of, but again, it was a good deal regardless of where they went. Uh, well, it means that we have consulates in places where there are special groups of people, there are special political or diplomatic issues, or there are American presences that are important. For example, I was in the consulate in Adana in the southeast of Turkey, as you know. That is an area of great tension over the past 40 years with the PKK. It's got a somewhat different population, and we have a huge American base there at Incirlik. I was in a consulate in Munich. Again, Bavaria is like the Texas of Germany. People are different there. They have a different attitude, more positive towards America than elsewhere in Germany, generally speaking. And we had many American bases and many American interests there. So when there's a special interest, it often makes sense to have a consulate. So I'm very happy the consulate is there, and I urge our government to keep it. It is always good to have an American uh, contact. Now, there are places where we don't have consulates, but where we have specific political entities and such, and they have ways to contact through the embassy. But often it's more efficient when you have a great deal of interests and activities to have a consulate that is dedicated. My understanding, it's not complete, but it is based upon having many contacts in Turkey and in Iraqi Kurdistan, is that very little is done by Ankara on issues related to the PKK, particularly the PKK more broadly, including its headquarters in Kandil in Iraqi Kurdistan, without prior consultation and usually agreement with various Kurdistan regional authorities. And I'm sure that that's the case this time as well. The United States has been involved. I was involved when I was in Turkey 15 years ago in efforts. The United States officially and publicly has welcomed this, as well we should. It's a very important development, and it reinforces our security interests as well as those of Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and even Iran. Whether the United States is playing a quiet role or not, I do not know. I do know that the United States military, working with the Syrian Democratic Forces, who have ties to the PKK, have played a role in the posture of the Syrian Kurds towards the government. Well, that's a question of negotiations. As you know, the primary negotiation is with the Dems party, a party primarily of Kurdish voters in the Turkish parliament and the Turkish government, and of course with Mr. Öcalan and the Turkish government. I'm not privy to the details of them, but those issues have come up in the past, of course. And no, first of all, I know Turkey very well. I know from having seen it, the role of the Kurdish Turkish citizens inside the country. Many of them, probably more than half, have totally integrated into Turkish society in the west of the country. You still have more less developed areas, I should say, in the southeast of the country. But generally speaking, Kurds have made a great deal of progress, as have other Turkish groups in the last 30 years. They're not yet normal. First of all, we haven't officially recognized the new government and put an embassy in place. Secondly, the sanctions are still in place. There's a process going on to either waive them, that is temporarily halt them, or remove them, as Secretary Rubio discussed with the Syrian foreign minister the other day in Istanbul. There is the issue of the terrorism designation of both Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is still in effect, and of the Syrian government as a whole, which dates back to the Assad period. So these are all things to work through. But this is a huge step forward. Now, well before this occurred, as I mentioned, at least the US military was working to support the process between the Syrian Democratic Forces and the autonomous administration in Rojava and the central government in Damascus in January, February, March, first of all, to ensure ceasefires, and secondly, to begin this process of general integration. Of course. I was involved very much in the debates before the 2005 Constitution in Iraq, and there were very big differences between people who supported a strong central government in Baghdad and people who supported a strong regional system, a federalist system, such as the one you have in the Constitution. The Constitution didn't emerge from the sea like Venus. It basically had to be negotiated over 2 years. The federalism you have in Iraq is the product of the debate, discussion, elections, and other decisions by the Iraqi people. The Syrian people have to do the same. Not the same results, but they have to go through the same process, and nobody can predict in advance what that